Hello, my name is Aakanksha. I'm a postdoctoral scholar working with the Daugherty Water for Food Global Institute. I study the economic impact of water scarcity, especially with respect to the agricultural sector. Over the last several years, I have been working on a project that is a collaboration between the Daugherty Water for Food Global Institute, the National Drought Mitigation Center, and the United States Department of Agriculture. This project is about studying the economic impact of local groundwater management policies in Nebraska. Groundwater depletion is a major cause of concern across the United States and in fact worldwide, and there have been different policies that have been adopted to manage this resource. Among the different approaches that have been followed to conserve and manage groundwater are some examples like taxation, fees on the use of groundwater, subsidies to encourage the use of more efficient technologies of water use, or different forms of regulations which allow the managed use of groundwater. Many of these approaches have only been implemented in the last 10 or so years, especially in the United States, or are still in the making, for example, in California. This raises a lot of uncertainty about their economic implications. For example, there might be some unintended economic consequences of groundwater management policies which we have not foreseen. Can the design of these groundwater policies change the economic implications? That is, are some policies more economically viable than the other? Are some fairer than the other? Do some increase or decrease the economic disparities further? We do not have clear answers to these questions, especially not those which are based on real-world data. And our work attempts at answering some of these questions using the context of Nebraska. Nebraska is an ideal case to study for this project. This is because groundwater-led irrigated agriculture is very important for Nebraska's economy. It has the largest numbers of irrigated acres in the country, 90% of which are irrigated by groundwater. Secondly, Nebraska is a pioneer in local groundwater regulation in the United States. It has managed its groundwater resources via 23 locally elected bodies known as the Natural Resources Districts or NRDs since several decades. While many states in the United States have only recently started venturing into groundwater management, Nebraska has historical precedent in this area. There are many types of policies which have been adopted by the 23 NRDs across Nebraska, but we focus on two types of groundwater quantity regulations which we expect to have a drastic effect on farmers' irrigation decisions. These are number one, a well moratorium, and number two, the water allocations. A well moratorium is like a ban on the new development of new wells. That is, it prohibits the further expansion of land for irrigation. On the other hand, a water allocation is like a limit on the amount of water that can be extracted per acre per year from a land that has already been developed for irrigation. So these are the two kind of regulations that we focused on, and we collected information about these regulations by reading policy documents of the 23 NRDs across past several years and supplemented this information by conducting phone interviews with NRD leaders. This helped us create a timeline of the evolution of groundwater regulations in Nebraska. We then matched this information on the groundwater regulations with information on farmland sales, geospatial information on weather, soil, surface water rights, etc., and analyze this data using cutting-edge econometric techniques. Essentially, our purpose was to capture the economic value of agriculture through the value of the farmland and to check if the value of farmland changes when the regulations are switched on in some areas versus those areas where they remain switched off. So in this way, the estimate that we obtain is a proxy of the economic impact of the groundwater regulations. Our results show that dryland farms, that is farms which had never been developed for irrigation, faced a 9% loss in land value following a well moratorium. This is expected because these farmlands lose the potential for future development into irrigation and lose the future stream of income that could be obtained from developing the land into more productive irrigated agriculture. We also observe a slight shift in cropping patterns from water-intensive crops such as soybeans to dryland crops such as winter wheat in these areas which are affected by well moratorium. No changes were observed in irrigated parcels following either of the regulations. We also don't find any change in land values following water allocations. There are two main takeaways that we can get from our research results. First of all, well moratorium or any similar regulation that restricts the expansion of irrigation to new land may have some negative economic consequences for those who have not had access to irrigation in the past. In this sense, a regulation like water allocations may be a fairer alternative. Another important takeaway is the lack of any impact on irrigated land from any type of regulation, perhaps because the assets of irrigated farmlands have already been capitalized into the land. It is also possible that the farmers adapted very well to the new regulations and have been able to maintain their economic levels or their economic activity pretty well.